Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue dans un nouvel épisode du podcast Learn to French. Je m'appelle Eden et j'enseigne le français. Hello and welcome to another episode on the Learn to French podcast. If you are new here, my name is Eden and I teach French. Dans l'épisode d'aujourd'hui, nous allons travailler sur les révisions pour le niveau A2 en français. So in today's episode, we are going to work on an A2 French study guide. Learning French by yourself can be such a headache. In today's article, which you can see linked in the show notes, I would like us to go through this study guide to gather all the things to learn and master this level. So first of all, you might ask yourself, why do I need an A2 French study guide? There are many reasons for you to have this kind of guide, but the main one would be you're learning French by yourself and you would like to know what exactly you should focus on. So if you are planning on taking the DELF A2 exam, it's always good to have an overview of the things that you need to learn first. If, of course, you're not working on A2 French, you can head over to my A1 study guide that I have in my website, learntofrench.com. So how should you use this study guide? Of course, I will not be writing all of the lessons here, but as I've mentioned in my A1 guide, I would like you to do things by yourself. So I would like to encourage you to do things by yourself. As I've already mentioned before, I have worked with students from all ages, all countries, but there is one thing that we do during or after our classes, that is. And I noticed that this one thing that we do works for a lot of them. That is when a student asks me a question and if I think that they can find the answer by themselves, I let them do it. This means that I'm not going to directly answer their question. If they don't understand a word, for example, or if they are asking for the translation of a word when we're working on a text, for example, well, I'm not going to give them the definition instantly. I first ask them to check in the dictionary. And then, of course, if they don't understand, then they can simply come back to me. But I always encourage them to do things by themselves first. So we can also work on tasks and homework that I give them. I always insist on doing things by themselves, using the tools that they need. I'm not just letting them look in a dictionary and just tell them, oh, you're only going to use the dictionary. No, that's not how we work. I encourage them to use all the tools that they can find online. So by doing so, if the learner does the research themselves, they will be able to remember the steps that they took to get to where they are, which makes memorization much easier. So in this study guide, as I did in the first one for the A1 French study guide, I would like to break the elements into different categories: vocabulary, grammar, phonetic, conjugation, and spelling. That way, you'll be able to classify them and be more organized. So for each section, you will find the elements to learn in French and in English. And all you need to do is your own research. Google is your friend. That is what I like to say. Once you have taken a look at the information, you can create a checklist or organize your findings in a binder or a folder on your computer if you're not really a binder kind of person. Make sure to work on exercises after each lesson. There are plenty of them online and you just type in, for example, exercice passé composé or exercice imparfait. By working on exercises, this will be more real for you. So vocabulary is actually including the lexicon of a specific theme or topic in French. La grammaire, grammar, gathers the essential grammar points to master in order to be able to communicate and build sentences. So remember, grammar is a tool that you're going to need. Phonetic, so phonetic. These are the things that you need to know about the pronunciation of the French language. This will help you not only understand French better, but also will help you pronounce words properly. La conjugaison, so of course you need to make sure to include conjugation in your learning because it's essential to communication. And lastly, l'orthographe, which is the spelling. This gathers the spelling rules in French for your level that you might need to take a look at. So before we start with the main communication skills that I would like you to master for A2, especially for the DELF A2 exam, I would like to talk to you about today's partner, Languetalk. If you are serious about learning French, I recommend checking languetalk.com, where you can find talented native tutors for personalized one-on-one lessons online. To choose a tutor, you can watch their videos, you can check their pricing, and also book a trial session. Languetalk also has a superb French podcast, which is called Languetalk Slow French, in case you want some extra listening practice. So if you are interested, you can always check the links. They are in the show notes as usual. Now, back to our main communication skills for the A2 level. What I like my students to master for DELF A2, and not just DELF A2, but the A2 level in general, is parler de sa famille, parler de sa ville, so talking about your family, talking about your city, parler de son travail ou de ses vacances, parler de ses goûts, raconter un événement, raconter un souvenir, utiliser les formules de politesse, très important, inviter quelqu'un, accepter ou refuser une invitation, donner son avis, décrire une personne ou un lieu en détail, demander ou donner des informations, parler de ses projets dans le futur ou dans l'avenir, parler de son pays ou de sa culture. This can also come up in the DELF A2 exam. They might sometimes ask you to talk about your country or your culture. Comprendre des indications ou des instructions. So this is basically the skills that I want my learners to master before taking the DELF A2 test. Now, I am now going to talk about the main skills that you need to work on for the A2 level. But if you are not willing to listen, you can simply click on the link in the show notes and you will be able to read everything. Of course, I have also included some links, so make sure to move your mouse cursor around. That way you can also click on those links to check the lessons. Donc pour le vocabulaire A2, so for vocabulary, so for A2 vocabulary, you need to learn in addition to what you've learned in the A1 guide. You need to learn l'environnement, la santé et le corps humain, so environment, and then health and human body, le sport, le travail, les régions de France et quelques spécialités, so regions in France and specialties. That's also a plus for you. That's a bonus, especially if you're taking the DELF A2. La cuisine, l'hôtellerie et la restauration, so hotels and restaurants, le tourisme, tourism, les expressions imagées, so figurative expressions. This is where I like to introduce some expressions in French. Les unités de mesure, so units of measurement, les pourcentages, percentages, les fractions, fractions, les événements au travail, work events, la maison, so décoration ou style, so decoration and style regarding housing, les fêtes et les célébrations, so celebrations. These are the main vocabulary points that I want the learners to remember. So regarding la grammaire, grammar, exprimer les quantités, expressing quantities, les pronoms toniques, tonic pronouns, le pronom on, so how to use the pronoun on. I also like to talk about the COD, direct objects, and COI, indirect object. So COD stands for complément d'objet direct, and COI, complément d'objet indirect. So these are the direct objects and indirect objects of the sentence in French. Along with that, of course, I would like you to learn les pronoms COD et COI, so direct object pronouns and indirect object pronouns. Next, le pronom en and le pronom I. So the pronouns en and I. How to use them and when to use them. These two are also linking to a lesson on my website. Les expressions utilisées pour la comparaison. So expressions used for comparison. You need to know how to use some expressions to compare some things in French. Les pronoms relatifs qui et que. So the use of qui and que as relative pronouns. Exprimer la possession. Express possession. Les pronoms possessifs, which goes along with the previous point, possessive pronouns, le mien, la mienne, les miens, le tien, la tienne. Exprimer la durée, express duration. Exprimer la fréquence, express frequency. Exprimer la condition avec si, express condition with si. Les pronoms démonstratifs, so demonstrative pronouns, celui, celle, ce, etc. Bon versus bien. So this is regarding the use of bon and bien. Bon is an adjective and bien is an adverb. Beaucoup versus très. So two adverbs here, the use of beaucoup and très. Les adverbes de manière ending in ment, M-E-N-T. Adverbs of manner ending in ment. Les verbes qui utilisent a et de. So verbs using a and verbs using de. Parler à, penser à, etc. Donner un conseil, give an advice. Donner un ordre, give a command or an order. Formuler des questions en français. So you can use inversion, est-ce que, or intonation to formulate questions in French. Le discours rapporté au présent. Reported speech at the present tense. So for example, he says that, and we're going to use il dit que, etc. Les différences entre a et chez, so the differences between prepositions a and chez, C-H-E-Z. Les conjonctions de coordination. This can sound intimidating, but it's not. It's correlative conjunctions. So, mais, ou, et, donc, or, ni, and car. You need to learn these as well and when to use these small words. L'accord du participe passé. So the agreement of past participle. So this is when, for example, you use passé composé with être, but also avoir in some cases. La préposition pour. So the preposition pour. And lastly, demander à quelqu'un de faire quelque chose. Ask someone to do something. Once again, these grammar points are to be learned in addition to your A1 study guide. So the next section, phonetic. In addition to your A1 French guide, I would like you to learn les liaisons obligatoires, so mandatory liaisons in French. Which ones are mandatory? L'intonation, so intonation. La lettre U et le son U, so the letter U and the sound U. These should be your main goals in French phonetics. Les liaisons obligatoires, l'intonation, la lettre U et le son U. Of course, if you would like to learn more, you can simply do more research, but this is what I come across when I work with students. They're having some difficulties with these specific points. Next, orthographe, spelling. So once again, just like phonetics, you can do more research if you want, but the main problems that I encounter with my students are écrire le son O, so writing the sound O. So you can write the sound O in different ways in French, like I-A-U, A-U, or O, etc. L'élision. So the elision. The elision is when you cut a vowel from a word and link it to the second word with an apostrophe. Just like in what I just said, l'élision. We don't say la élision, we say l'élision. So when do we need to use an elision in French? Et, et, or est, est. So the use of est versus est. E acute accent or E-E-R. So the spelling of E acute accent, or ER. So when do we use one? Especially if the word, for example, if you hear chanter, you don't know if this one is going to end with the letter E acute accent or ER. And lastly, ou and ou. So ou, O-U, and ou, O-U with an accent on the U. For French spelling, I highly recommend you to work on dictations. I post dictations weekly here on my podcast. And lastly, we're going to talk about conjugaison. Once again, in addition to what you learn in A1. So, les verbes du troisième groupe au présent de l'indicatif. Third group verbs in present tense. You need to master them. This is where you also are introduced to le conditionnel présent, so the conditional, how to form it and when to use it. Donc, par exemple, j'aimerais or je voudrais. Le subjonctif présent. This is also an introduction to subjonctif présent, the subjunctive mood in French. Les révisions. So, what do you need to review and really master? L'impératif présent and le passé composé versus imparfait. I always like to insist on these two elements in A2 because it doesn't mean that you learned it in A1 that you're not going to forget about it. Next are the verbs être, avoir, venir, and aller, conjugated in présent, passé composé, imparfait, futur simple, conditionnel présent. These are the important verbs that you need in those tenses. Also, same thing for devoir, pouvoir, and vouloir. Présent, passé composé, imparfait, futur simple, conditionnel présent. So learn those essential verbs in those tenses. Of course, once again, you can do more research. This is just an indication. This is just a guide that should help you focus on the main things that you need to learn. You are always welcome to do more research. All this information, once again, is to be learned in addition to what you can find in the A1 guide. So remember that this is just in addition. Et voilà. J'espère que vous avez aimé ce petit épisode aujourd'hui. Once again, if you would like to read everything, you can click on the link in the show notes. And if you would like to take some extra lessons in French, don't forget to check Languetalk as well. The links are also in the show notes. Merci beaucoup d'être resté avec moi aujourd'hui et je vous dis à très bientôt pour un nouvel épisode sur Learn to French. Au revoir!